The morning alarm echoed through the ice research station in Antarctica. Dr. Marcus Webb pulled his thick jacket closer as he stepped out into the freezing wind. For 3 months, his team had been drilling deep into the ancient ice layers, looking for climate data from thousands of years ago. But today would change everything. "Dr. Webb, you need to see this right away," called out his assistant, Tom Bradley. The young researcher's voice carried excitement and confusion. He stood near the main drilling site, holding something in his gloved hands. Marcus walked over quickly, his boots crunching on the hard snow. "What did you find?" Tom held up a strange object. It was made of a metal that seemed to shine with its own light, even in the gray Antarctic morning. The object was about the size of a book, covered with symbols that looked nothing like any human writing. "We found it at the 200-meter mark," Tom explained. "But that's not all. There's more down there. Much more." Marcus took the object carefully. It felt warm, even through his thick gloves. The symbols seemed to move slightly when he looked at them, creating patterns that almost made sense, but not quite. "How much more?" Marcus asked. "Come see for yourself." Tom led him to the drilling equipment. It set up powerful lights around the hole, and when Marcus looked down, his breath caught in his throat. The light showed carved stone structures, deep in the ice. These were not natural ice formations. Someone had built something here long ago. "Get the extraction team ready," Marcus said quietly, "and call the university. Tell them we need more people and equipment, a lot more." Over the next week, the small research team grew into a major excavation project. They brought in heating equipment to melt the ice carefully, and lifting machines to pull objects from the frozen ground. Each day brought new discoveries. The structures were huge. Entire buildings had been preserved in the ice, along with countless objects like the first metal piece Tom had found. But the most shocking discovery came on the 7th day. Dr. Webb called Sarah Chen, the team's archaeologist. "You need to come to Section 4 immediately." Marcus hurried over to where Sarah was working. She had uncovered what looked like a tomb, but it was unlike anything from human history. The body inside was clearly not human. The creature had been tall, perhaps 8 feet, with long arms and a head that was larger than a human's. Its skin had turned to dust long ago, but its bones remained. Around the body were hundreds of the glowing metal objects, all covered with the same strange symbols. "This is impossible," Marcus whispered. "How long has this been here?" Sarah checked her instruments. "The ice layer dates to at least 50,000 years ago. Maybe older. 50,000 years. Marcus stepped back. That means the civilization existed long before humans built anything more complex than simple tools. The news traveled fast. Within days, the discovery was being discussed in universities around the world. But it was Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, a language expert from Mexico, who made the breakthrough that would change everything. Lisa had been studying the symbols for 2 weeks when she figured out the basic pattern. The metal objects were not just decorative. They were books written in a complex but logical language. "The symbols tell a story," Lisa explained to the team gathered around her computer. "These people called themselves the Veltar. They were explorers who traveled between stars long before humans even existed." "What happened to them?" Marcus asked. Lisa's face grew sad as she read from her translation. "They got sick, some kind of disease that spread through their entire civilization. The last entries talk about their final days, how they came to Earth hoping to find a cure, but it was too late. So they died here, not just here," Lisa said, pointing to her screen. "According to these records, they had settlements all over Earth, hundreds of them, and they're all buried under the ice and ground just like this one." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Antarctic cold. "Are you saying there are more sites like this? Many more?" The Veltar mapped their settlements carefully. "If these coordinates are correct, there are burial sites under every major continent. The implications hit everyone at once. If the Veltar had built settlements all over Earth 50,000 years ago, and humans had later built cities and towns on the same land then, we've been building on top of their graves," Tom said quietly, "for thousands of years." Meanwhile, thousands of miles away on Space Station Alpha Prime, Ambassador Alina Rivers was having what she thought would be a routine day. Alina represented Earth at the Galactic Council, the organization that governed relationships between different planets and species in their part of the galaxy. The council chamber was a massive round room where representatives from 43 different worlds met to discuss trade, conflicts, and cooperation. Lena had been Earth's ambassador for 5 years, and she was used to the strange sights and sounds of so many different alien species in one place. Ambassador Rivers called Counselor Thane, a tall blue creature from the water world of Narita. "You have received an urgent transmission from your home world." Lena felt her heart skip. Urgent transmissions usually meant bad news. She quickly accessed her communication panel and saw the message was from Dr. Marcus's Webb in Antarctica. The message was long and detailed, with hundreds of photos and video files. As Alina read and watched, her face went pale. The metal objects, the ancient buildings, the alien body, the translations, everything. Counselor Thane Alina called out, "I need to request an emergency session. We've discovered something on Earth that the Council must know about immediately." "What kind of discovery?" Thane asked. Alina looked around the chamber at all the different alien faces. Some looked curious. Others seemed annoyed at the interruption. None of them knew what was coming. "We have found evidence of an ancient civilization on Earth. A non-human civilization that existed 50,000 years ago. They called themselves the Veltar." The chamber fell completely silent. Lena had never heard it so quiet before. Even the usual background noise of translation devices and breathing stopped. Finally, an elderly counselor from the Draxi system stood up slowly. His name was Elder Corin, and he was one of the most respected members of the council. "Did you say Veltar?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Yes," Alina replied. "Why? Do you know that name?" Elder Corin's face showed an expression Alina had never seen before. It was shock, fear, and something else she couldn't identify. "Ambassador Rivers," Elder Corin said slowly. "The Veltar are not unknown to us. They are legend. They are the ancient ones that many of our species trace their origins to. They are our ancestors." Alina felt the room starting to spin. She gripped her chair tightly. "Your ancestors," she managed to say. "Yes," said another counselor, this one from the Morvani homeworld. "If what you say is true, then your species has been living on the sacred burial grounds of the most honored civilization in galactic history." The silence returned to the chamber, but now it felt heavy and dangerous. Lena realized that what had seemed like an amazing archaeological discovery was actually something much more serious. Earth had a problem, a very big problem. The emergency session of the Galactic Council began 3 hours after Elena's announcement. Word had spread quickly through the space station, and now representatives from every member world crowded into the chamber. Many had called their home. Governments and Elena could see the anger and shock on dozens of different alien faces. Elder Corin stood at the center of the chamber, his old voice carrying clearly to every corner of the room. "For thousands of years, 12 different species in this council have shared stories of the Veltar. We believed they were myths, legends told by our grandparents. If Earth speaks the truth, then our ancestors were real." "Show us the proof," demanded Counselor Voss from the Centauri Federation. His species looked almost human, but with silver skin and completely black eyes. "We will not take human words alone." Alina activated the large display screen and began showing the images from Antarctica. The metal objects appeared first, their strange glow visible even in the photos. Then came the pictures of the ancient buildings, preserved perfectly in the ice. But when the image of the Veltar body appeared on the screen, the chamber erupted in noise. Several counselors stood up. Some made sounds that Elena's translator couldn't handle, and others began talking rapidly in their own languages. "Silence," Elder Corin shouted. "Let the human continue." Lena showed Dr. Rodriguez's translations next. The story of the Veltar civilization, their travels between stars, and their final days on Earth appeared on the screen in both the original symbols and translated text. "They were peaceful," Alina explained. "They came to Earth not as conquerors, but as refugees. They were dying from a disease and hoped our planet might help them find a cure. But they died anyway," said Counselor Thane softly. "And they were buried on your world, yes, Elena nodded. And according to their records, there are burial sites all over Earth. Hundreds of them. The chamber fell quiet again. Then Counselor Keth of the Morvani people stood up. The Morvani were known for their strong religious beliefs, and Keth was their most important spiritual leader. Human, Keth said, his voice full of emotion. Do you understand what you have told us? Your species has built cities on top of the ice, graves of the most sacred beings in our history. You have walked on their bones for thousands of years. Elena felt sick to her stomach. We didn't know. We had no idea they were there. Ignorance is not an excuse, Keth replied angrily. The Veltar are mentioned in the holy books of 7 different species. They are the reason we learned to travel. Between stars, they taught our ancestors about science, about peace, about exploring the galaxy with respect for all life. Another counselor, this one from the insect-like Nixari, clicked and buzzed in their own language before the translator caught up. My people's creation stories speak of tall beings from the stars who showed us how to build our first cities. We always wondered if these stories were real, and we know they were, said Counselor Drex from the Kalani system. And we know where those teachers went to die. Lena tried to keep her voice steady. What does this mean for Earth? What does the Council expect us to do? The question seemed to anger several counselors even more. Keth stepped forward, his alien features twisted with rage. Your species builds its cities on sacred ground. Your children play where our ancestors. Bones lie broken. Your machines dig through burial sites that should be treated with the highest respect. Once you ask what we expect, we're willing to work with the Council, Elena said quickly. Earth wants to do the right thing. The right thing. Counselor Voss laughed, but it was not a pleasant sound. The right thing would have been to discover these sites and immediately stop all construction. The right thing would have been to ask the galaxy for guidance before continuing to desecrate holy ground. Elder Corrin raised his hand for silence. The human speaks of working with us. What exactly does Earth propose? Lena had been hoping someone wouldn't ask that question so soon. She hadn't had time to speak with Earth's government about possible solutions. All she could do was speak. Honestly, I don't know yet, she admitted. This discovery is only days old. Our government is still trying to understand the full situation. Then let me help your understanding, said Counselor Keth. Based on Dr. Rodriguez's translations, there are Veltar burial sites under your major cities. New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing, Moscow, New Delhi. Millions of humans live and work directly on top of our ancestors' graves. Elena's head began to spin as she realized the true size of the problem. You're saying we would need to relocate entire cities? We're saying you should never have built them there in the first place, Voss replied coldly. The debate continued for hours. Elena learned that the Veltar weren't just important to a few species, were considered the foundation of galactic civilization itself. According to the various counselors, Veltar had visited dozens of worlds before coming to Earth, always as teachers and helpers, never as conquerors. They gave my people our first written language, explained one counselor. They taught us how to grow food in space, said another. Our mathematics, our star charts, our understanding of medicine, all came from Veltar knowledge, added a third. As the session continued, Elena began to understand that Earth wasn't just dealing with an archaeological problem. They were facing a crisis that could destroy their relationship with the entire galaxy. Captain James Harrison arrived from Earth the next day with a full team of scientists and government officials. Elena met him at the docking bay, grateful to see a familiar human face. How bad is it? James asked immediately. Worse than we thought, Elena replied as they walked toward the council chambers. The Veltar aren't just an ancient civilization. They're basically the founding fathers of galactic society. Half the species here trace their knowledge and culture. Back to them, James stopped walking. We've been building on their graves for thousands of years. James, the preliminary surveys show over 200 sites across 6 continents. Some are under small towns, but others are under major cities with millions of people. Captain Harrison was a military man who had seen difficult situations before, but Elena watched his face go pale as he understood the implications. What are our options? He asked. That's what we need to figure out. Council's demanding action, but they haven't specified what kind yet. Some want us to immediately evacuate all the sites. Others are calling for Earth to be expelled from the galactic community entirely. Entered the council chamber, where the debate was still continuing. Lena noticed that more species had sent representatives overnight. Word was spreading throughout the galaxy, and everyone wanted to be part of the discussion about Earth's fate. Counselor Keth was speaking when they arrived. The humans claim ignorance, but ignorance of the law does not excuse breaking it. Galactic tradition, desecrating the dead is one of the most serious crimes possible. But they didn't know the dead were there, argued Counselor Thane. Surely intent matters, does it? Keth replied. If someone accidentally destroys your family's tomb, does your grief care about their intentions? Elder Corrin noticed Elena and James entering. Ah, more humans arrive. Captain Harrison, I believe. Your reputation precedes you, James nodded. Respectfully, Elder Corrin. I've come to help find a solution to this situation. And what solution does Earth propose? Asked Counselor Voss. James looked around the chamber at the dozens of alien faces, all waiting for his answer. Elena could see that he was thinking carefully about his words. Earth needs time to properly survey all the sites and understand the full scope of the situation, James said finally. We want to do right by the Veltar and by this council, but we need to know exactly what we're dealing with first. Time, Keth's voice rose angrily. Every day that passes is another day of continued desecration. Every human footstep on those sites is another insult to our ancestors. The chamber erupted in arguments again. Some counselors supported giving Earth time to investigate, while others demanded immediate action. Elena realized that the galaxy was splitting into factions over what to do about humanity. As she listened to the angry voices around her, Elena understood that Earth's future in galactic society hung in the balance.
Ow.
Whatever they decided to do next would determine whether humanity remained welcome among the stars or became outcasts in their own galaxy. President Rachel Morgan sat in the emergency meeting room. Deep beneath the White House, around the large table were the most important leaders from every nation on Earth. The room was filled with tension as reports kept coming in from Space Station Alpha Prime. The situation is getting worse by the hour, reported General Hayes, reading from his tablet. 3 more species have joined the protest against us. The Nexari have closed their trade routes to human ships. The Kalani are threatening to cut off our access to their medical technology. President Morgan rubbed her tired eyes. She hadn't slept in 2 days since the Veltar discovery became public. What's the latest count on the burial sites? Dr. Marcus Webb, who had flown in from Antarctica, stood up with his report. We've confirmed 218 sites across all 6 continents. The largest ones are under New York, London, Tokyo, and Beijing. But there are also sites under smaller cities like Denver, Melbourne, and Cape Town. How many people would need to be relocated? Asked Prime Minister Thompson from Britain. Dr. Webb's voice was quiet. If we had to clear all the sites completely, we're looking at approximately 50 million people worldwide. The room fell silent. 50 million people was more than the population of many entire countries. That's impossible, said President Chen. From the Asian Federation, where would they all go? How would we house them, feed them, give them jobs? The cost alone would bankrupt half our governments, added Chancellor Mueller from the European Union. President Morgan looked around the table at the worried faces of world leaders. What are our other options? Foreign Minister Rodriguez spoke up. Ambassador Rivers sent another report this morning. Some council members are suggesting we just ignore the sites and continue as we have been. They argue that, since the Veltar are already dead, moving them won't help anyone. The others want us expelled from galactic society entirely. Counselor Keth is leading that movement. He's calling us spiritually bankrupt and saying humans don't deserve to walk among civilized species. President Morgan stood up and walked to the window, though all she could see from the underground room was concrete walls. 50 years ago, we made first contact with alien life. It was the greatest moment in human history. We learned we weren't alone in the universe. We joined the galactic community. We gained access to technologies that improved life for everyone on Earth. She turned back to face the room. Now we're being told we might lose all of that because we built our cities in the wrong places, thousands of years before we even knew aliens existed. Madam President, said General Hayes carefully, with respect, maybe we should consider the minimal approach. We could relocate people from just the most important sites, the ones the aliens care about most. We could turn those areas into memorial parks or something. Which sites would those be? Dr. Webb asked. The ones under major cities, the ones that affect the most people. Dr. Webb shook his head. It's not how it works, General. Every Veltar burial site is equally sacred to these alien species. A grave under a small town in Kansas is just as important to them as one under Manhattan. President Morgan sat back down and looked at each person around the table. I want everyone to think very carefully about what I'm going to say next. We have 3 choices. First, we can try to negotiate some kind of compromise, relocating some people, but not others. Second, we can refuse to move anyone and risk being cut off from galactic society. Third, we can do something that no civilization in galactic history has ever done. What's the third option? Asked Prime Minister Thompson. We move everyone, all 50 million people. We completely clear every single Veltar burial site on Earth. The room erupted in protests and arguments. Several leaders began speaking at once, their voices mixing together in chaos. That's economic suicide. It's politically impossible. The cost would be trillions of dollars. My people would never accept it. President Morgan held up her hand for silence. I know it sounds impossible, but think about what we're really talking about here. We're not just dealing with Earth politics or Earth economics. We're dealing with our place in the galaxy. She stood up again and began pacing slowly around the table. 80 years ago, we were alone on one small planet. Now we trade with 43 different worlds. Our medicine comes from alien plants. Our energy comes from alien technology. Our children learn about the universe from alien teachers. But the cost, President, Chen protested. My government alone would need to relocate 12 million people. Where would we get the money? We would spend it over time, President Morgan replied. Not all at once. We could do it in phases over several years, and we wouldn't be doing it alone. If we commit to this plan fully and completely, I believe some of the alien species would help us. Foreign Minister Rodriguez looked doubtful. Why would they help us? They're angry at us. Because no species in galactic history has ever voluntarily displaced their own population for the sake of another species dead. It would be unprecedented. It would show that humans are willing to sacrifice everything to do what's right.
Oh.
Hayes leaned forward. Madam President, are you suggesting we spend decades of our planetary budget and relocate 50 million people just to impress aliens? No, General. I'm suggesting we do it because it's the right thing to do. That Veltar came to Earth when they were dying. They were looking for help, for hope, for a cure that never came. They died here alone, far from their homeworlds. The least we can do is treat their resting places with respect. Dr. Webb spoke up quietly. I've been reading more of the translations from the Antarctic site. The Veltar were teachers. They traveled from world to world sharing knowledge, helping other species develop technology and culture. They never asked for payment or conquered anyone. They just helped because they believed it was right. And now we can follow their example, President Morgan said. We can show the galaxy that humans learned something from the Veltar, even though we never met them alive. The debate continued for hours. Leaders called their governments. Economists ran calculations, and military advisors discussed logistics. But slowly, as the day wore on, something began to change in the room. Chancellor Mueller was the first to speak up. If we're going to do this, we need to do it completely. No half measures. If we relocate 49 million people but leave 1 million on burial sites, the gesture loses all meaning. The European Union can commit to relocating our affected populations, she continued. It will be difficult, but we've handled large population movements before. President Chen looked surprised. You're actually considering this? I'm not just considering it, Chancellor Mueller replied. I'm endorsing it. This is bigger than politics or economics. This is about who we are as a species. One by one, other leaders began to agree. Not because it was easy or cheap or politically safe, but because they realized President Morgan was right. This was about humanity's character, about what kind of species they wanted to be. By evening, every major government on Earth had committed to the plan. They would relocate all 50 million people living on Veltar burial sites. They would do it carefully, respectfully, and completely. President Morgan made the announcement to Earth's population that night, and to the Galactic Council the next morning. Ambassador Rivers was given permission to address the Council during their emergency session. The government of Earth has made a decision, Alina announced to the packed chamber. We will relocate every human living on or near a Veltar burial site, all 50 million people. We will do this over the next several years, and we will fund the largest archaeological preservation project in galactic history. The council chamber fell completely silent. Lena could see shock on dozens of different alien faces. Furthermore, she continued, Earth commits to spending the equivalent of 30 years of our planetary gross domestic product on this project. We will work with council archaeologists to properly honor Veltar remains and preserve their artifacts. Dr. Webb, who discovered the first site, has volunteered to lead the restoration efforts. Elder Corrin was the first to speak. Rivers, are you saying that your species will voluntarily displace 50 million of your own people? Yes, Elder Corrin, we are. And spend decades of your world's wealth on this project. Yes, for the sake of people who died 50,000 years ago, people your species never even met. Alina looked around the chamber at all the alien faces, watching her. Yes, because it's the right thing to do, because the Veltar deserve respect. And because we want to prove to this council that humanity can learn from our mistakes. The silence that followed was different from the angry silences of previous days. This silence was full of surprise, confusion, and something else Alina couldn't quite identify. Finally, Counselor Voss spoke up. No civilization in galactic history has ever done anything like this. Then maybe, Alina replied, it's time someone did. 1 year after the evacuations began, the Veltar Memorial Complex stood where New York City had once been. Ambassador Alina Rivers walked slowly through the main entrance, amazed at what human and alien engineers had built together. The complex was beautiful beyond anything she had imagined. Crystal spires reached toward the sky, their surfaces covered with Veltar symbols that glowed softly in the morning light. Gardens filled with plants from dozens of worlds surrounded carefully preserved excavation sites where visitors could see the ancient Veltar buildings exactly as they had been found. It's incredible, said Dr. Webb, walking beside her. When we started this project, I thought we were just preserving archaeological sites. I never imagined we'd be building the most important cultural center in galactic history. Alina nodded, looking around at the crowds of beings from different worlds who had come for today's dedication ceremony. She saw families of humans who had been relocated from New York, now living in new cities across Earth and other planets. She saw Morvani children learning about Veltar history from their teachers. She saw Nexari archaeologists still carefully studying artifacts in the research center. How many species are represented here today? Alina asked. 47, replied Captain Harrison, checking his tablet. Every member of the Galactic Council, plus several species that aren't even council members yet. This is the largest gathering of different species in galactic history. The dedication ceremony was set to begin at noon. Alina made her way to the central plaza where a stage had been built directly over the largest Veltar burial site. The remains of over 300 Veltar had been found here, all buried together in what appeared to be a final ceremony of their own. President Morgan was already on the stage, talking quietly with Elder Corrin and other council members. Alina had never seen so many important leaders from different worlds in one place. As noon approached, the crowd grew quiet. Alina estimated that over 10,000 beings had gathered in the plaza, with millions more watching through galactic communication networks. President Morgan stepped up to the speaking platform. She looked out over the massive crowd, taking a moment to appreciate the significance of the moment. 1 year ago, she began, humanity made a discovery that changed everything. We learned that we had been sharing our world with the remains of one of the galaxy's most honored civilizations. We learned that the Veltar, the legendary teachers and healers, had died on our world 50,000 years ago. The crowd was completely silent. Lena could see tears in the eyes of several alien delegates. We also learned that we had been building our cities and towns on top of their graves. For thousands of years, we walked on sacred ground without knowing it. When we discovered this truth, we faced a choice. President Morgan paused, looking around at the crystal spires that now marked the burial sites. We could have made excuses. We could have argued that we didn't know, that it wasn't our fault, that the Veltar were already dead and moving them wouldn't help anyone. Many species might have chosen that path. Instead, we chose to listen to our conscience. We chose to honor the dead, even though they were not our dead. We chose to sacrifice our own comfort and wealth to do what we believed was right. Elder Corrin stood up from his seat and walked to the platform. President Morgan stepped aside to let him speak. For 60 years, I have served on the Galactic Council, Elder Corrin said, his old voice carrying clearly across the plaza. Have seen species fight wars over trade routes. I've seen civilizations destroy entire planets for their resources. I have seen the worst that galactic society can offer. He turned to look at President Morgan. But I've never seen anything like what humanity has done this past year. You have shown us what true honor looks like. You have proven that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing. The crowd began to applaud, but Elder Corrin held up his hand for silence. The Veltar were teachers. They traveled from world to world, sharing knowledge and helping other species grow and learn. They never asked for payment or conquered territory. They helped because they believed it was right. He gestured toward the memorial complex around them. Today, humanity has become the greatest teacher the galaxy has ever seen, not through conquest or force, but through example. You have taught us all what it means to truly honor the dead. Dr. Webb was called to the platform next, carried with him a collection of Veltar artifacts that had been discovered during the excavations. These objects tell the story of the Veltar's final days on Earth, he explained, holding up one of the glowing metal books. They were sick and dying, far from home, with no hope of return. But even in their darkest hours, they continued to teach and help others. He activated a holographic display that showed images from the excavation sites. We found evidence that the Veltar spent their last years treating sick animals, teaching Earth's early humans about agriculture, and trying to find cures for diseases that affected local wildlife. The images showed Veltar medical facilities, libraries, and even playgrounds where alien children had played while their parents worked. They could have spent their final days in despair, Dr. Webb continued. Instead, they spent them serving. Others, they died as they had lived, as teachers and healers. When Dr. Webb finished speaking, something unexpected happened. Counselor Keth of the Morvani people stood up and walked to the platform. Alina remembered how angry he had been a year ago, calling humanity spiritually bankrupt. I owe humanity an apology, Keth said, his voice filled with emotion. When I first learned about the Veltar burial sites, I was angry. I accused your species of being unworthy of walking among civilized beings. He looked out at the crowd, his alien features showing deep regret. I was wrong. What you have done this past year has shown me that humanity doesn't just walk among civilized beings. You lead them. Keth turned to face President Morgan directly. In Morvani culture, there is a saying, honor is not what you do when others are watching. Honor is what you do when no one will ever know. Humanity has shown honor beyond anything our culture has ever imagined. The crowd erupted in applause. Lena saw beings from dozens of species standing and cheering, many with tears streaming down their faces. But the most important moment came when President Morgan stepped back to the platform for her final speech. We gather here today not to celebrate what humanity has accomplished, she said. We gather to apologize. The crowd grew quiet again. We apologize to the Veltar for the centuries during which their remains were disturbed by our unknowing construction. We apologize for every building that was built above their graves, every road that was paved over their resting places, every footstep that fell on ground that should have been treated as sacred. President Morgan's voice grew stronger. We cannot undo the past. We cannot bring the Veltar back to life or give them the peaceful deaths they deserved. But we can promise that their sacrifice will not be forgotten. Memorial Complex. This place will stand as long as humanity exists. The Veltar will be remembered not just as the galaxy's teachers, but as the beings who taught us our greatest lesson, that honor has no price and doing right has no limits. The ceremony concluded with a moment of silence for the Veltar dead. 10,000 beings from 47 different worlds stood quietly in the plaza, honoring the memory of a civilization that had died 50,000 years before most of their species had even learned to read. After the ceremony, Alina found herself standing with Elder Corin near one of the excavation sites. They watched as human and alien children played together in the memorial gardens, learning about Veltar history from interactive displays. "What happens now?" Alina asked. Elder Corin smiled. "Now the real work begins." The council voted unanimously yesterday to grant Earth's permanent membership with full honors. But more than that, we want to ask humanity to help us revise the Galactic Charter. Revise it how? To include what we're calling the Veltar Principles. Standards of behavior based on what your species has demonstrated. The idea that doing right matters more than convenience. That honor toward the dead is a measure of honor toward the living. A true civilization means taking care of those who cannot take care of themselves. Lena felt a chill run down her spine. You want to base galactic law on what humanity did here? You want to base galactic law on what the Veltar taught us through humanity's example? Elder Corin corrected. The Veltar were teachers in life. Through your actions, they have become teachers in death as well. As the sun set over the memorial complex, Elena realized that the apology humanity had offered to the galaxy had become something much more important. It had become a promise about the kind of species they wanted to be, and an invitation for the rest of the galaxy to join them in honoring that promise. The Veltar were gone, but their greatest lesson lived on. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is the right thing, even when nobody is watching, even when it costs everything you have, and even when the only reward is knowing that you acted with honor. Humanity had learned that lesson well, and in doing so, they had taught it to the entire galaxy. The first ship to arrive at Earth after the announcement came from the Morvani homeworld. Ambassador Alina Rivers watched from the observation deck of the orbital station as the sleek vessel approached. She didn't expect this visit, especially not from Counselor Keth's people. "They're requesting permission to land in New York," reported Captain Harrison, checking his communication panel. "But New York is one of the cities we're preparing to evacuate." Alina frowned. "What do they want? They say they're here to help?" 3 days later, Alina stood in what used to be Times Square, now mostly empty, as the relocation process began. The Morvani engineering team had set up their equipment in the middle of the street, their tall blue forms moving efficiently around strange machines that hummed with energy. Commander Lisa Torres, who was overseeing the New York evacuation, walked over to Alina. "I still can't believe this is happening. Yesterday the Morvani were calling us spiritually bankrupt. Today, they're helping us move entire apartment buildings." Alina watched as the Morvani machines carefully lifted a 20-story building into the air. The technology was incredible, allowing them to move structures without damaging them or disturbing the ground underneath. "Keth said something interesting when his team arrived," Alina told Lisa. "He said that watching humans sacrifice so much for the dead changed his mind about our species. He called it the most honorable thing he'd ever seen." The evacuation of New York had begun 2 weeks earlier. City government had expected riots, protests, and chaos. Instead, something remarkable was happening. People were leaving their homes voluntarily, many offering to help their neighbors pack and move. Alina had visited several other evacuation sites around the world. In London, families were relocating to temporary housing in Scotland and Wales. In Tokyo, entire neighborhoods were moving to new cities being built on artificial islands. In Beijing, the government was constructing underground cities to house displaced populations. But the most surprising development was happening in the smaller towns. Places like Riverside, California, and Millbrook, New York, were completely emptying out. The residents weren't just moving away. They were helping archaeologists carefully excavate the Veltar burial sites that had been hidden beneath their communities for thousands of years. Dr. Webb had set up his main research center in what used to be downtown Denver. Alina visited him there 1 month after the evacuations began. "How's the excavation going?" she asked, watching teams of humans and aliens working together to carefully uncover ancient Veltar structures. "Better than I ever imagined," Marcus replied, pointing to a newly uncovered building. "The preservation is incredible. We found intact libraries, art galleries, even what looks like schools. The Veltar weren't just dying here, they were trying to rebuild their civilization." Lena saw tears in his eyes. The children's section of the library still has books in it. Picture books teaching young Veltar about the stars. They had families here, Alina. They had hope. A group of Nexari archaeologists worked nearby, their insect-like forms moving delicately around the ancient artifacts. Alina had learned that. The Nexari were considered the best archaeologists in the galaxy, but they had never worked with humans before. Dr. Webb called out one of the Nexari, her voice translated through a small device. "We have found something you should see. Today." Walked over to where the aliens were working. They had uncovered what looked like a workshop, filled with the same glowing metal objects that had been found in Antarctica. "These are not books," the Nexari archaeologist explained. "These are star maps." The Velta were mapping the galaxy, marking every world they visited. Marcus leaned closer to examine the objects. "Do you think they were trying to find a way home? Or perhaps," said another voice, "they were mapping safe places for other refugees?" Alina turned to see Elder Corin approaching. The old alien looked tired but determined. "Elder Corin," Alina said, surprised. "I didn't know you were coming to Earth. Had to see for myself," he replied, looking around at the excavation site. "In all my years on the Council, I have never seen anything like this. 3 species have sent archaeological teams to help with the excavations. 2 more have offered engineering support for the relocations. The entire galaxy is talking about what humanity is doing." "What are they saying?" Alina asked. Elder Corin smiled, an expression Alina had never seen on his face before. "They are saying that perhaps the Veltar chose the right world to die on. After all, the work continued for months. In every city, town, and village where Veltar remains were found, the same pattern emerged. Humans would pack up their belongings and move to temporary housing, often far from their original homes. Then teams of archaeologists would carefully excavate the burial sites, treating each discovery with the respect due to sacred ground. The economic impact was enormous. Earth's governments were spending money faster than they had ever spent it before, but something unexpected was happening. Other species were contributing too. The Centauri Federation donated advanced construction equipment to help build new housing for displaced populations. The Draxi provided medical supplies and food. The Kalani offered their expertise in city planning and architecture. Lena was reviewing the latest reports when Captain Harrison brought her news that shocked her. "The Nexari have done something unprecedented," he told her. "They've opened their borders to human refugees." Alina looked up from her paperwork. "You mean, the Nexari have never allowed no Nexari to live on their worlds? Never. But they've just announced that any humans displaced by the Veltar excavations are welcome to settle in Nexari space permanently." "Why would they do that?" James sat down across from her. "According to their ambassador, they're impressed by what they call our respect for the Ancient Ones. They want to reward what they see as unprecedented honor." Similar offers began coming in from other species. The Morvani offered jobs in their space construction projects. The Draxi invited human families to settle on their agricultural worlds. Even the normally isolationist Kalani opened their borders to human immigrants. Dr. Webb sent regular reports from the excavation sites. Each one revealed more about the Veltar civilization. They found evidence that the Veltar had been teachers and healers, traveling from world to world, sharing knowledge and helping other species develop their cultures. "We found medical facilities," Marcus reported in one transmission. "The Veltar were trying to cure their disease right up until the end. But they were also treating local wildlife that had been injured or sick. Even while they were dying, they were trying to help Earth's native animals." Lena felt a deep sadness when she read that report. The Veltar had come to Earth as refugees, but they had died as healers, trying to help even the planet's animals until their final days. The most moving discovery came from a site under what used to be a small town in Kansas. The excavation team found what appeared to be a school, with the bodies of adult Veltar surrounded by the remains of young ones. They didn't abandon their children when they got sick, Dr. Webb explained in his report. The adults stayed with the young ones until the end. They died together as families. Lena had to stop reading the report. She walked to the window of her office on the space station and looked down at Earth. From this distance, she could see the lights of the temporary cities that had been built to house displaced populations. She could see the dark patches where major cities used to be, now being carefully excavated. The intercom on her desk buzzed. Ambassador Rivers, you have a call from Elder Corrin. Alina activated the communication system. Elder Corrin's face appeared on her screen, but he looked different somehow. Less stern, more thoughtful. Alina, he said, using her first name for the first time. I wanted to give you an update on the Council's discussions about Earth. What kind of update? The debate has shifted completely. 3 months ago, half the Council wanted to expel humanity from galactic society. Now there's a different conversation happening. Alina felt her heart speed up. What kind of conversation? The kind where species are asking if they can learn from humanity's example. The kind where we're questioning whether we've been approaching interspecies relations correctly all these years. Elder Corrin paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Alina, what your species is doing has never been done before. The entire history of galactic civilization, no species has ever voluntarily sacrificed so much for another species dead. You're not just honoring the Veltar, you're changing how the galaxy thinks about honor itself. Alina felt tears starting to form in her eyes. We're just trying to do what's right. And that, Elder Corrin replied, is exactly why the galaxy is starting to see humanity differently. You're not doing this for political gain or economic advantage. You're doing it because you believe it's the right thing to do. That kind of moral courage is rare in the galaxy. The call ended, and Elena sat back in her chair. Outside her window, she could see ships from a dozen different species arriving at Earth, all bringing help for the evacuation and excavation efforts. Humanity had started this journey facing the possibility of galactic exile. But somehow, by choosing to do the most difficult thing possible, they were earning more respect than they had ever had, Beth.